what else can we do to build that element of trust on a Skype business meeting?
That's the challenge. It's quite difficult. Trust is different online versus in person. Trust takes time, first of all, and the very nature of a face-to-face conversation allows for a bit of that time. You do get the chit-chat beforehand. You do begin to relax with the person before you start business, the business part of the discussion. And then, of course, trust in a different way takes time. It can take months or years to develop real deep trust with somebody. Online, we substitute something that's quite different for trust. We don't trust in the same way. What we substitute is consistency. And so if somebody's inconsistent online, we tend to assume they are ne'er-do-wells or up to no good or dangerous lunatics or something. The person who in a face-to-face meeting is used to being able to crack a joke or two occasionally will find him or herself struggling online if you go for 20 minutes on a Zoom call, let's say, and then suddenly throw in a joke. It can feel inappropriate even if you feel like you know the other person, because you don't have that sense of connection that you do in a face-to-face meeting that comes about automatically just from being in the same room. And let me be clear, there's a very specific neuroscientific reason why we do that, or why we do trust somebody in that way face-to-face, and why it's hard to do online. And that is that when you meet somebody for the first time, or even meeting with an old friend face-to-face, there's a lot of what we call unconscious mirroring going on. And so as we sit there, we tend to adopt the same posture. And coaches like me, people who teach body language, will train people to mirror deliberately in order to increase trust if you want to win over the opposite party in some way. But we all do it naturally. And it's not manipulative or nefarious in any way. It's just a natural part of how humans get on the same wavelength. When we sit down, we're trying to meet with our opposite party at another company that we're negotiating with, say, or on a sales call. We want to get comfortable with one another, because the alternative is much worse. Who wants to have an uncomfortable conversation for an hour, right? So we humans naturally, unless we're feeling very combative, we naturally mirror each other's behavior. Now, what we tend to mirror is large body language movements. So we'll sit in motion. We'll sit in the same posture. We'll sit the same way in a chair, or we'll both lean forward over the table that we share at the same moment, or that kind of thing. That sort of behavior is very difficult to do well, to mirror well on a video conference, because it's two-dimensional. And so really my motions are reduced to a very few simple things. I can lean into the camera, but that's going to look weird if I lean in too far, and your natural reaction is going to be to lean back rather than leaning in slightly. So you lose a lot of the subtlety of the possibilities of mirroring. And so we don't build up trust as fast or as much in these online meetings. And that's a fact a neuroscientific fact, which is just very difficult to get around. So, you can do it a little bit, and there are strategies we can talk about. Just to give you one, for instance, you can mirror the language of the other person. So if you start talking and you use the word sales incessantly, then I might use the word sales more frequently than I normally would too. That's not as effective as mirroring body language, but it helps a little.
Sure. There's two things. It's three things. One, I have this phenomenon regularly when I meet guests that I've interviewed, like we've spoke a number of times now, Nick, when I meet them outside of the podcast, and we're at a sales conference, which obviously don't exist anymore, or I see them in an airport, whatever it is. It happens every time. I get told, wow, you're way taller than I expected you to be, because I've obviously sat down at this desk and there's no context for my height. And I also get told, and it sounds like I'm trying to blow my own trumpet here a little bit, but this is what I get told, that I'm a lot more funny than I am on the podcast itself. So when you're talking about cracking a joke on a Zoom call or a online meeting, I find it really difficult to crack the jokes and the banter in that little bit of back and forth that I do in person I don't know whether it's because there's that slight delay in the audio and video being transmitted from you to I. I don't know whether it's a confidence thing. Maybe to go back to what you said earlier then as well, maybe I feel less relaxed on a Zoom call. As you know, I've done 700 of these interviews now, if not more, considering I've been in other people's shows as well. And I feel like I'm relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely different versus being in front of someone and you can gauge them a little bit easier. So just a number of phenomena that you're talking about there, Nick, I've felt firsthand. So you mentioned then, I guess, mirroring people's the words that they're saying. Is there anything else that we can do to kind of build that level of trust that might come organically and naturally? That we're not trying to increase the level of trust. We're just trying to get it back to where it would be in a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah, there are two things you can do which sound mutually contradictory, but they're not. The first one is to listen more than you talk, and that's good advice in person too, that I'm sure your listeners and viewers have heard many times. But it's even more important on video conferencing. And then the second one is to do what we call go first, meaning the beginnings of a conversation tend to set the tone and the expectations. And if I start by telling you a heartrending story of some trauma that I've suffered and thereby enlist your sympathy and you realize what a wonderful, authentic, courageous guy I am, then that will take our conversation in one direction. If, on the other hand, I talk about my favorite football team, that will take the conversation at another level. And it means probably a missed opportunity because when you're in person, salespeople for years have gotten away with that kind of polite level of chit chat because your unconscious minds are busy doing the hard work of creating trust that you therefore don't have to do in the chit chat. So you can talk about football or sports or the latest happening of one kind or another. In the online world, you can't assume your unconscious minds are going to be doing that work. They're not. And so you have to do the work yourself through the storytelling, through the disclosures that you give. So you have to be a little braver in the online relationship and go deeper first. And you have to listen more, and you have to do both of those things.